Hey, what's up you guys? Yes, today I'll be talking about the history of medicine in the 1920s throughout the 1930s, so let's dive in. 1920s innovation brought out the invention and use of insulin and penicillin, insulin being a groundbreaking treatment for diabetes, which was previously an incurable disease. Penicillin, which was an antibiotic fungus, was discovered a little bit later in 1928 by Alexander Fleming and would later become the world's most effective life-saving drug. Throughout this decade, a ton of other innovations and discoveries came to light. Doctors and scientists worked hard to come up with ways to treat and cure diseases such as measles, scarlet fever, syphilis, and tuberculosis. Other big takeaways being the invention of, I'm not even going to say it, so here it is right here, which measured brain waves. The Pap smear was invented in 1927 to detect cervical cancer, and also in 1927, the iron lung to help with assisted breathing. I'm going to stray away from all the cool fun facts and talk about some interesting events related to medicine and public health that occurred in the 1920s. In the 1920s, Harlem, New York was experiencing a huge rise in population, and this rise in population meant that there were less medical professionals to help everyone out and less resources available. This led to the emergence of alternative medicine, spirit healers, and what eventually became known as the healthcare wars of 1920s Harlem. These healers gave hope to the sick and provided unconventional treatments that often worked better than what a medical doctor could do for someone. In 1926, the city's new Division of Illegal Medicine began to crack down on these unusual healers, who might be prosecuted for their unlicensed practice of medicine, illegitimate use of the word doctor, and fortune-telling. Another mind-blowing thing that occurred in the 1920s was the rise of eugenics. I think I'm saying that right, but basically that means the science of good breeding and just gene editing. People agreed to this science in overwhelming numbers despite its immorality. The 1927 court case Buck versus Bell eventually allowed for the legal and forcible sterilization of over 70,000 Americans in Virginia and other states. The case revolved around Carrie Buck, her mother and child, who were deemed to exemplify hereditary feeble-mindedness and therefore unable to reproduce. Both the stories about the healthcare wars in Harlem and this court case were significant shortcomings of our healthcare system in the 1920s. With all these new discoveries, inventions, and innovations, questions arise about how we would afford all these new things, and that brings us to the 1930s healthcare and the Great Depression. World War II and the Great Depression were huge roadblocks for any serious and groundbreaking medical advances, but there are still some notable ones that I will share. But first, some background info. In the 1930s, it is said that over 40% of Americans relied on government relief and couldn't afford healthcare. People having to treat themselves at home resulted in physicians and healthcare workers not being paid as much. Modern drug therapies were yet to be invented during this time, so often someone that checked into a hospital would stay there for an average of 2 weeks. Those who couldn't afford beds suffered and died of cancer, respiratory diseases, and heart attacks in large numbers during the Great Depression. Funding for medical and public health research was tight during this time, so there definitely wasn't as much going on as there was in the 20s. Big advances during this decade include better blood transfusions, the widespread use of hormones, vitamins, and insulin used in therapy. A big public health and medical issue was the outbreak of the polio disease. It is said that as many as 1 in every 1,000 cases of polio was actually caused by trials of a flawed vaccine. Roosevelt's New Deal agencies provided medical insurance, childcare, help for the disabled, and boosts in public health campaigns for the first time in the lives of many Americans. The amended Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 also protected the public from dangerous drugs and procedures. And there you go. That was a little bit of everything you need to know about healthcare in the 1920s and 30s. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.